While I was at Costco, I picked up 4 rotisserie chickens and we are going to try freeze drying them. Hi, I'm Jonathan, the Provident Prepper. We're going to start by deboning these chickens and put them in the freeze dryer. Then we're going to take the carcasses and make some broth out of those, and we're going to try freeze drying the broth. So let's see how that goes.
It's really important to us that we don't waste any of our resources, and the chicken carcass, along with all the skin and the bones and everything that's in there, will make a fantastic bone broth.
Right now we have a batch of strawberries in the freeze dryer, so we're going to take this meat and just cover it in its trays and take it and put it in the freezer so it will be frozen when we're ready to put that in the freeze dryer. So we just want to make sure this is fully done. So we're going to take a piece and just, yep, and it appears to be very done. 1,505 minutes, just a little over a day, and used 12.66 kilowatt hours. Here are the 3 rotisserie chickens that we got to freeze dry, and they look just like meat. Obviously when you get close you can see that they are dried out, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to taste just a little bit. The flavor is really good. And I'm going to take just a couple of pieces, maybe a dark piece, a light piece, and just put them in this water so that they can reconstitute. We'll try those here in just a few minutes. But now we're going to package this up so that they are ready for long-term storage. Now we're going to put away this chicken in long-term storage. We've got them in the Mylar bags. We're going to use oxygen absorbers to help for long-term storage. So we'll put these oxygen absorbers in. And then we want to make sure we close up this jar as quickly as we can. Now we can seal them using the infult sealer. We'll just give it a couple of... Okay, now these are all sealed up. They are ready to go into long-term storage. In addition, we also did a jar full of the meat chunks with an oxygen absorber, and that also is ready to go. Now we had put water in and rehydrated this meat, and this is the truly amazing part to me. This is just like it came off the bird. It is very, very tasty and it has great texture. Just an amazing thing to me. So there you have it. We're going to be eating this sometime down the road and we're going to truly enjoy it.
When I make my bone broth or my chicken stock, I like to put all the bones and the skin and everything that we didn't use with the rotisserie chicken in the crock pot. And then I have a bunch of onions that I've cut up to put in there. Those are from our garden earlier this year that have been in storage. And then I take celery and I cut the bottom and the top off, the stuff that we normally wouldn't be as excited about using, and all that celery goes in here. These can totally be big chunks. They don't have to be cut up small. And I have some parsley that we harvested from our indoor garden, and a hot pepper, just to give it just a little bit of kick. We'll just put all of that in here. I'll put a little bit of salt. You can put any spices that you want. And I like it to be able to be fairly neutral, so I don't add too many other flavors to this. Carrots go really well in this. And then we will just cook this for between 24 and 48 hours. A few of the spices that I do like to put in here is some pink Himalayan salt, some freshly ground pepper, because that makes everything taste better. And few bay leaves. And then we'll just put the lid on this and let it cook. I am really excited about the potential to be able to freeze dry bone broth or chicken broth, because most of the chicken broth that we buy has MSG in it, and we try and eat a clean diet except for the naughty things that we eat. But if I could freeze dry this, that would mean a huge difference for my family. We had taken the rotisserie chicken and taken all of the skin and the bones out and put it with some vegetables and then cooked it. Now, when you are doing bone broth, I mean, really 24 to 48 hours. If you're just wanting the flavor, you don't have to do it that long, but you get more of the minerals and the nutrition from the carcass for the longer that you do it. So as you can tell, this is a beautiful, rich flavor. It has the vegetables in it as well as the chicken broth. And what I'm skimming off here on the top is the fat. You can totally use the fat if you want, but I'm a little bit concerned about how it's going to freeze dry. So the lower the fat in the freeze dryer, I think the better off we will be. So I'm just trying to skim it off. So what I did is, after we strained this and took it out of the slow cooker, I put it in the fridge to solidify overnight. And you can tell it kind of separates. I could have strained this a little bit better. I just run it through a colander because I'm okay with some of the little particles that are in it. But the flavor of this bone broth is amazing because we put our spices in it. It's got the salt that we want, and it's just the absolute perfect level. One of the problems with bouillon that you normally buy is that sometimes it is just incredibly salty for the amount of flavor that you get. And this is just packed with flavor. So we're gonna put this in the freeze dryer and see how well it turns out. A recent report indicated that we should no longer be bottling elderberry syrup at home, and yet elderberry syrup is a wonderful medicinal tool. And so, trying to stay within those guidelines, I have a friend who made some elderberry syrup, and we put it in this little silicone mold, and it was frozen in her freezer at home. And we are going to try and see what happens if we freeze dry this, because that could take care of the problem where you either have to have it in the freezer or the refrigerator to make sure that it's safe. I'll just put the silicone tray right here on this and we'll see how that goes. And then we have more pineapple, because pineapple was one of our favorites, that we put in the freezer when we cut it all up at the same time. And I will just finish loading this up with pineapple to finish making sure that our freeze dryer is completely full.
The chicken broth took approximately 2,725 minutes. That is almost 2 days, although it stopped or was actually done in the middle of the night, so it would have been something a little less than that. And this one took 24 kilowatt hours, so in our terms, about $2.40 to do this batch.
We just took out the bone broth or the chicken stock that we had made from the freeze dryer, and it definitely looks nice and dry. It's snapping well. We are going to put it in the blender or in my Vitamix because I would like it to take up as little space in storage as I can get it to. All right, now that it's blended up, I am going to just put it in this clean mason jar. So tap it down just a little bit. I should have put the oxygen absorber in first, but we'll fix that. We'll put it in midway. There we go. So one tray is a little bit less than one of these pint-sized mason jars. But I'm gonna go ahead and seal it up just like that. All right, so we reconstituted it, and now comes the true test. That is absolutely delicious. So I can tell just a little bit that it's different from the original stock. Could be because I didn't really measure out my ratio of water to the broth, but actually that is really, really good. And I will experiment with this one over the next week or so and see what we think of it. So in the same batch, we have this elderberry syrup, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I want you to listen. It's been maybe 10-15 minutes since we took that out of the freeze dryer, and it's still popping. So I'm just going to put all the pineapple in a bag. One of the perks from being able to do this. Oh, that is so good. Freeze-dried pineapple, I think, is one of my favorites. And so, as always, we're going to add the oxygen absorber because that will help this really stay fresh and good much longer. This should stay good in our long-term storage if we actually let it last that long and don't just eat it up. I could totally see this entire bag being a fantastic Friday night snack. Healthy and yet and delicious. Seal looks good. It's ready to go. And Johnny, who's behind the camera, gets to eat the pineapple. Let's talk a little bit about the freeze-dried elderberry syrup. I'm doing this for a friend of mine whose mother is ill, and she's been giving her elderberry syrup to help her get better. It's really bubbly. It's got to be due to the sugar content. So it is coming out of the trays in these little things. It's still popping. It's a little bit sticky feeling. I am uncomfortable trying to store this long term. I just kind of get the feeling that I just shouldn't do that. I wonder, now elderberry syrup doesn't have a delicious taste anyway. It totally explodes in my mouth, kind of like Pop Rocks. So what I think I'll do is, without an oxygen absorber, I am just going to send these pieces home with my friend, because I definitely think once it quits its popping, that it could be a good thing, but I don't think we're gonna get a longer shelf life than we would have by just putting it in the freezer, which is sad. We are gonna sum up our experiment where we freeze-dried 3 rotisserie chickens, and out of that we were able to get these 4 bags of freeze-dried rotisserie chicken, which was actually wonderful. It's really good, rehydrated, and this 1 pint jar. And then what we did in a separate batch, while this was in the freeze dryer, we created that bone broth, that chicken stock with that incredibly rich flavor, and put it in the freeze dryer. And all of that bone broth came down to these 2 jars. I prepared this one for long-term storage with an oxygen absorber in it, so that we can store it a little bit longer. And this one I am just going to use. I love the way that it turned out, the way that it reconstitutes, the flavor, and the fact that my bone broth is shelf stable instead of having to either pressure can it or keep it in the freezer. We did experiment with some elderberry syrup. I don't think that really turned out that well. I would not recommend it for long-term storage. It was still popping when we put it in the jar about 20 minutes after it had come out of the freeze dryer. And because we had room, we did another batch of pineapple, which is one of my very favorites. Hands down, I think the rotisserie chicken, when we put it on the tray, we removed the skin and the fat, and we put that in with the bone broth. And I think that is definitely a favorite for mine. I'm thrilled to have this in my longer term food storage and to be able to grab a bag and be able to put it in a meal for my family. So, having a great time with our freeze dryer? What is your experience freeze drying meat in your freeze dryer? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.